I think we're going to get started. We have a quick poll before we get rolling officially anyway, so that'll gobble up a minute or two. So welcome everybody to the Sensible Assessment Community of Practice for Smarter Balanced Interims and our districts who are here sharing as well today. I am going to start a quick Teams poll. Feel free to jump in and respond to these. We can't track who's who on these responses. So there's, I think, one or two questions that might lean a little bit into like, ooh, I don't want to answer that, but we can't tell who you are. So be fearless and answer these. So does your district currently use Smarter Balanced Interims? You can walk through these on your own. And some of these are about interims. Some of these are just bonus material for showing up at the workshop today. What is typically the busiest approximate testing time for Smarter Balanced? If you use interims, are you pleased with them? Yes, no, not sure. They are awesome. And the fourth question is, when is CSDE tentatively planning to open rolling results this year? I only see one response, and I think that's mine. So at least I need one other person to jump in and join me here. So please participate in the poll. Oh, 8 responses. Okay, good. Okay, we got about 10 or 12. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's take a look at the results. Let's see what we have here. So looks like, does your district currently use Smarter Balanced Interims? It looks like, wow, 100. I'm either reading this wrong or everybody here uses them. That's great to see. Okay, so 100% of you. Next up is, what is typically the busiest approximate testing time for Smarter Balanced? For those of you that went to May 9th, that would be the correct day. So May 9th and May 10th is traditionally when the heaviest test submissions occur, not on April 1st. That's not meant to be a joke, but it's May 9th, about May 9th, May 10th. Next up, if you use interims, are you pleased with them? About 3/4 of you said yes, so yippee, that's great to say. See, about 10% of you said not sure. Hopefully we'll sway you a little bit during this webinar, and then 12% of you said they are awesome, so that's great to see too. I hope all those awesome people aren't all CSDE people. And then finally, when is the CSDE tentatively planning to open rolling results this year? Yes, we are doing that again this year, and the correct response is May 15-ish. Okay, so don't text me or email me on the 15th and say, where are they? We promise we're working towards that day. That's when you'll see your kids' results flowing into the system. Okay, enough of the polls. Let's get started on our presentation. Okay, we have a small slide deck here again. So welcome again to the Performance Office Sensible Assessment Series. My name is Abe Christ from the Performance Office. This is our monthly community of practice where we share ideas about implementing sensible and balanced assessment systems. The purpose of this community of practice is to foster a deeper understanding of the variety of tools that we offer from CSDE. In this meeting, we'll share information, but we'll also be joined by some of our district partners. And today's focus is on the Smarter Balanced Interim Assessment and how they are used to inform curriculum and instruction. Thank you very much to our district partners today for joining, my colleagues who are here, and also those of you that are attending for coming. A couple of things to make the meeting a success. The slide deck link is in the chat. We are recording this, so if you couldn't make it or one of your colleagues couldn't make it, it will be posted on our training site. You are on mute, so if you want to get a question in, you can chat it in, or you can certainly email us at our email address here. We'll all stop. We also might stop at several points during the presentation to raise your hand and you can ask questions. So about the agenda today, we're going to touch on quickly a little bit about sensible assessments. Again, it's going to be quick. Then we're going to turn it over to our partners from ACES, Isaac, and Ledyards, Melissa Riza and Dr. Ann Pember from ACES, and then from Isaac, Nick Spera and Lisa Lazaru. Also, I think their mascot, Dragon, might be showing up. I'm not sure about that, but I guess we'll wait and see once they come up. And then Ledyard, Holly Miller is joining us. So thanks very much for all of you guys for coming out. And then finally, we'll wrap it up with a quick summary and share some resources. So again, this is the fourth in our series. We're focusing on our interim assessments, our smarter interim assessments. We do have one more at the end of May that is going to be more focused on looking at the results. So as a reminder, Connecticut's assessment system is designed to support the learning around the Connecticut Common Core standards and the NGSS. And we offer, of course, our summative assessments, but also our interim blocks and also our formative assessments. Today is really a focus on some of the resources and the tools that are available using our Smarter Balanced interim assessment. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Christy, who's going to talk a little bit about each of the types of assessments here. Christy?
Okay, so just very quickly, for those of you who might be questioning the difference between a formative, interim, and summative, this is just a quick cheat sheet, a breakdown of the differences between the three. And today, as Abe noted, we're really going to focus on interims and how we can incorporate interims into curriculum and instruction, and how those will support our educators. And then, Abe, do you want me to share my program, or you're going to drive?
I got it. Thanks, Christy. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent.
So we're jumping right in to our district sharing, and we're gonna leading off this afternoon is Melissa and Ann from ACES, and so we'll hand the baton to you guys.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Melissa Riza. I am a math instructional coach.
And I'm Ann Pember. I'm a STEAM instructional coach.
And we are currently a 6-8 magnet middle school and rolling out 9th grade in the fall. So we'll be 6-12 over the next few years. Hit the next slide. So just to give you all a little bit of background on our philosophy of assessments and the data that we use regularly to inform our instruction, we use illustrative math for our core curriculum. We use iReady Diagnostics, MyPath, teacher assigned lessons. We also have a school-wide writing goal, so our students are constantly doing SMP3 writing prompts and IABs. Though our presentation is going to focus mostly on math, we do the same process in ELA and science as well, but my role is a math instructional coach, so we'll focus on that a little bit more. Next slide. So to give you a little additional background, pre-COVID, I think I spent a lot of time taking screenshots of all the IABs there were to offer in 6th through 8th grade and sharing them with teachers so they would just use them for a do now every now and again. And we've truly evolved over the past few years. We started this year by creating report groups and giving access to all of our teachers. So at the beginning of the year, every teacher from PE to social studies to Spanish was looking at student SBA data in math, reading, and science. We wanted all teachers to be engaged in student outcomes based on SBA data. So that was really important to us. This laid the foundation for all of our teachers to be thinking about student outcomes. Our Wednesday meetings all focus on data, so this is what's driving it.
Next slide. So what we've done is we've created what we call our DataWise PLC. As Melissa mentioned, we meet on Wednesdays, and the focus on those Wednesdays is data. Between Melissa and I, we provide the educators with what our focus is during those meetings. And they're twofold in this process. One is to do an objective analysis of the data in a very structured way. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then once we do that objective analysis of the data, and particularly as we're talking about IABs, what are the implications for teacher practice and instruction? Next slide. So a couple of things that we like to point out, and this is important anytime we look at data. When we look at the IABs for our students, we are instructing our educators to assume that the students were doing their best work on that day. The other thing we do when we look at the data objectively is it has to be based in evidence. So as an example, if we look at results, we do not look at any anecdotal information at that time. It's purely, what does the data say? What are the IAB results? Which questions did students get right? Which ones did they get wrong? We are not commenting about why unless the data tells us yet. And then we ask our educators to come to these meetings with a very inquisitive focus. And it really, we remind everybody of these, and it's great. We've gotten to the point that in our PLC meetings, we remind each other of them if we end up losing our focus. Next slide. So when we meet, we have a template of information in a Google sheet that asks these specific questions. After we have done the analysis of the data in our objective way, what do we see? What do we notice? What do we wonder? We then go into addressing these questions. As we said, on Wednesdays, our teachers use the data. They may be with their content, or they may be interdisciplinary, but all of our meetings are by grade level or creative arts. And our teachers take the time to answer each one of these questions, and then we compare and contrast. The great thing about these is that when they walk away from these meetings, they go away with actionable steps that they can take from analyzing the data and coming up with strategies that they need. Next slide. So what we're seeing is that this process and looking at data, particularly at IABs, is that taking those steps and going through the process we've established is becoming part of the norm for our educators. So when they're done, we expect them to, and they do, become reflective on their practice. What are the conversations making them think about with respect to their practice, student learning, how they might change, enhance, improve things. And then in addition to that, what do we identify in that process that may have some implications for equity and access for all of our students? Next slide.
As Anne mentioned, oftentimes we'll use a Google Sheet with those questions as the headers where all of our educators are responding to them. What's awesome about that shared document is we can see the strategies that everyone else is using. So though it might have been something an LA teacher used in their classroom to support students with an IAB, it is relevant in all content areas. Another template that we've used to discuss our IABs is this one shared here, which was a Google Doc. We use this template to create a really specific plan for our students with strategies to address their needs. So you'll see that we're looking at students who might be at mastery but haven't had a lot of growth this year, or students who've made very little growth. So what can we do to support these students? What is the evidence that that strategy is being taught? What is the evidence that it's working? What is the date by which the effectiveness of this strategy will be assessed? So these are just another example of a template we might use in the DataWise PLCs. Next slide. So what came about recently this year, our 6th grade teacher gave a focused IAB on dividing fractions. So the first thing they wanted to do when we looked at the data in TIDE was focus on the lowest performing questions for our students. And we really made some comparisons and contrasted data across our 2 6th grade teams to determine if one group of students was more successful than the others. If so, what instructional strategies might they have used in that class? But we really did a deep dive into our individual students as well. We found one student who was in our accelerated 6th grade math class was performing below proficiency, and we really didn't know why until we looked at the questions he struggled with the most. With that discussion, we realized he was absent when we did a review at the beginning of the year of how to change a mixed number to an improper fraction. He got every single question with a mixed number wrong. So we realized, hey, we can just do a quick check-in with this child. and get them caught up and they'll be fine. Additionally, we saw in this focused IAB a lot of misunderstandings on questions, the last two questions of the assessment. One of them focused on a response with a partial serving as the answer, and the other one wanted students to round up to a whole serving. And students struggled with knowing when to do one and when to do the other. So we realized we needed to incorporate more problems like this in our daily instruction. Next slide. So that's a brief overview of how we are currently analyzing the data we get from our IABs at ACES at Chase. Are there any questions that we can answer?
Folks can put their questions in the chat, and if we don't, if as they move through the presentation, we can go back and we have a question section at the end, and also you can email questions if you have any later. Oh. So Michelle wants to know if you trained your teachers in the DataWise process.
And you're still muted. I see you talking.
Yes, we absolutely did. Melissa, is this our third year?
Is it third or fourth now at this point? I think
Yeah,
third.
so
We'll go.
we did. We had introductory meetings. We went over the templates. We revisit our norms and expectations at our meetings consistently with the teachers. And, it's gotten to the point now where, they really know what we need to do, how we need to do it, et cetera. And so we find that it does bleed into the other PLC meetings. But yes, we did take the time to train them.
Right, so
Thanks.
Abe, do you want to move through and I'll keep my eyes on the questions as we're going through?
Sounds good. Thanks. Thanks, Anne, and thanks, Melissa, for sharing your side. And we will turn the page now to Isaac, and I'm going to introduce Nick Spera and Lisa Lazaru from Isaac. Nick, I'm going to turn over to you.
All right, thanks, Abe. We're excited to be here. Thanks for giving us the call. Ours is kind of a journey, the story of how we were even able to come today and talk to you all is kind of unique. So I'm Dr. Nicholas Spera. I'm the executive director of Isaac. This is Lisa Lazaru. She's our core instructional coach. She was on a separate computer. That computer died while we're on, but this is how we adjust, right? So, one thing about who we are, Isaac Interdistrict School for Arts and Communication, charter school, one of the 20 or so charter schools in Connecticut. We are a public school. 80% of our students do reside from New London. However, any student in the area can apply. We're grades 6, 7, and 8, 276 kids. Our free and reduced lunch is just over 70%. Our EL population is about 50 students in our building, with 87% of our students being historically underrepresented population. So that's a little bit about Isaac. And then kind of the journey of, where we came from. So this is like kind of the once upon a time thing, I like to say, back in 2019, pre-pandemic, dead last. Isaac was dead last. The old Pittsburgh Pirates, sorry, Pittsburgh Pirate fans, but, or my father said the Florida Marlins back in the day. But that's where we were. And I remember when I came on board in 2020, Abe, I called you first, if you remember. And I said, I know nothing about SBAC. Tell me everything you know, because I got to increase the scores here. And so, one of the conversations, that's kind of how it started with, what do the people in the building know? And so historically, just that's a good context. So we kind of went to that 3 E's of learning, right? The experience, the exposure. There wasn't one teacher that has ever gone through the entire SBAC, like no exposure at all. And so I would say it's hard to teach something when you don't even know what the game is. And it's hard to even prepare someone if you don't even know what game you're going to play. And so I actually remember during COVID, we stood 6 feet apart, Lisa and I, and took the IAB 6th grade. And then we were worried that our knowledge wasn't even at a 6th grade level when we were questioning whether we had the right answer. But it was really giving that time to teachers to go through it, get a little messy with it and understand it. One other thing is that we weren't practicing with our students. And so students didn't have that opportunity to even get exposed to it until it was the May 9th when most schools do it, as Abe said before. So for us, it was, understanding what an IAB is at that time and what FIABs are. And then it really took off from there. And I'll go to that in a little bit. But for us, we really did a lot of PD and curriculum writing, where we embedded the EL strategy, key terms, and vocabulary, because we really had a student population, and still do, that haven't been exposed to a lot of the words that they see on the SBAC. It's things that, my own kids who live in Old Lyme, and they're exposed to, but students here, they just don't. They didn't know what a leash was. They never heard that term. And so it's getting them exposed to terms, not just our ELs, but also for all students that were coming to us. So that was one other piece. The other thing is, just like the last group talked about, was kind of getting the do nows and the warm ups for that exposure and getting that experience. And for us, we also use something called Edulastic, which has a really nice bank of SBAC style, IAB style, FIAB style questioning, where we actually have our assessments that are, based on the units that we're delivering in all of our core subject areas, where students take those style questioning. And then the last thing is, again, like the last group said, and it's kind of common, is we established PLCs and IPLCs, but we changed the master schedule to allow for that collaboration and for that meeting time to work. And we did it in a vertical and horizontal way. So as tough as it is, we do have time where all of our 6th, 7th, and 8th grade team meet together. And then we also do it by content area. So we have a block scheduling. On A day, it's the teams of the grades. And on B days, all the content teachers, 6, 7, and 8, they're all meeting at the same time too. And that allowed for the deep dive into what Lisa will talk about in a little bit, about the deep dive into looking at, was the assessment saying, how do we change our instruction? How do we change that for the future and get better? So as I move on, I think I just clicked the right button there. We had to go to a new way of practice. And so we really looked at, our IABs and FIABs, but really we worked with the State Department of Ed. So I'm not just saying this is actually true, so Christy Alberino is on here, and Shakira Vasquez and Jennifer Mikulik really helped us out with understanding, hey, what IABs would work at the right time. The research that is out there that I remember Christy shared with us is, if you give that, I believe it's the big number 4, that really showed growth in terms of the assessment when students take it in May. And for us, it's hard to get to that 4th, right? It takes a lot of time. And so for us, we had to use the do now for that kind of number 4. So you'll see in a little bit, we have a schedule where we do 3 a year per subject area throughout, but that 4, and I was saying to Lisa before, it's kind of like you sneak it in, like mixing vegetables into like the food for your kids who don't like vegetables. They didn't even know they were doing the 4th IAB, FIAB at the time, but through the do now process, we were. So that was a really big collaboration piece. I talked a little bit about the Edulastic, and really, before I turned over to her, one big thing that we did establish here was, how do you support the teachers to do the work that they are really unfamiliar with? And so, we had the ARP funds that we were able to keep that position following the decline of ARP funds that all of the districts are facing. But we created a core instructional coach that originally was our current principal was in that role, and now Lisa's in that role, and she really guides that work with the PLCs and IPLCs. And so she'll talk a little bit about her role in that and kind of where we go moving forward.
So this is our assessment schedule, and we start in the beginning of the school year by laying out what 3 focused IABs we're going to do throughout the school year. These are delivered through the testing system, and they're delivered in a formal manner. So students are logging in, they're taking it similar to how they would take an SBAC. The goal is for them to feel comfortable, be exposed to the content, the high level text, and to practice using their tools for SBAC that are embedded, and to build stamina. And we have stuck to the 3 right now, partly because we are still balancing that stamina and test-taking strategies. We don't want to over-test our students, but we want them to have the exposure and practice and the data that these give us. We worked with Jen and Shakira and Christy to look at which ones fit best with our curriculum and would give us the most information for moving forward. Then we take the data to PLC and IPLC. We meet weekly with our subject area teams, and then we also meet weekly with grade levels. So we'll look first. So for example, this week we looked at a 6th grade brief write, and we looked at that as ELA subject area, looked at it as social studies teachers, looked at it as science teachers, and then we brought it back to grade level also.
And one thing about the PLC, so if one wondering where that formal training, it's the Do For model. So really working with that group that does that work for that. So that's kind of where we got our PLC and IPLC knowledge from.
We also want our teachers, Nick talked about, we want them to feel comfortable, and we want them to feel comfortable talking about where their students didn't do well. And sometimes that's scary for teachers. So we've really developed this cohesiveness in the PLCs to do that. We have a reflection sheet that we use, and teachers come with that prepared. So they look at the data alone first, and then we look at it all together. We do open the centralized reporting system. We rely on this a lot to look at the questions that students scored the lowest on. This is, I think, the brief write one, and this was the one we looked at this week. We really looked at one question and opened it, picked it apart. We were able to look at a bunch of student responses. And we also do this for our unit assessments and compare and contrast the data.
Oh, we're still on. Hey, Abe, are we still on? What slide are we on right now? I'm sorry. I thought I was hitting the slide.
You're on 26 right now. Well, 28 now.
Perfect.
Nick,
Thank you.
Okay.
Abe is actually moving the slides. He's moving them for everybody. Everyone can go forward and backwards within the presentation to be able to look at the slides.
Outstanding. All right, good.
Just flag me when I need to advance it, Nick.
All right, thanks, man.
Yep.
So we look at major questions, we're looking for patterns among grade levels. We're looking at low performing students, like our level 1 students, and what can we do to get them to a 2 or a 3. We're looking at what additional instruction is needed for our EL students. Teachers keep their own data tracking forms where they can filter their EL students and their special ed students, so we can see if those groups are making progress. And then we really look at what skills are missing, and we use that to drive our curriculum revisions, which would be like the following week's meeting for PLCs. So data, and then go back to the curriculum. What standards and skills do we need to put in? What unit tasks can we create that replicate some SBAC or IAB style questions, but are related to the content the students are learning at the time? I think, this slide shows additional IABs that we're using within the classroom. So students are using these questions together. So they're not sitting for a full, 40-minute taking the IAB, but we're using it instructionally in all grades. 6th grade has taken on a very unique sharing of the IABs among all subject areas. So science, social studies, math does the math ones, and then ELA, but they're all kind of sharing the brief write and the informational text. So students are looking at questions, going over questions that they got incorrect together in all the different classes.
And just the need for that, we were noticing about 2 grade levels to 3 grade levels on average that students were coming to us in the 6th grade. And so it just made sense that we had a kind of, it's always nice to do an interdisciplinary piece, but really embedding that ELA piece strongly in science and humanities was a big shift for us in 6th grade. So that's something that, you know, when we get to next steps, you'll see that too. You can go next slide. So slide 29, this is the high leverage instructional practices. We use the research from the University of Pittsburgh for our high leverage practice. We have an 8-9 year PD plan where, you know, we really make sure that students are using the accountable talk piece. So our teachers are using academically productive talk moves to engage students and to invite the accountable talk within the discussions. We know that the research says when we talk about it, it sticks. And when it sticks, we're really comprehending it. And then for the other piece that we have for writing to learn, that's our stage 2 that we're in right now. And that's where we have something that's really the think, write, pair, share piece of it. And that's what really we start doing now. So you can go to the next slide, Abe. And so here, this think, write, pair, share is how we're using a lot of the IAB, FIAB questions. I talked about how we use, you know, the 3 that you saw on the schedule. But now it's about how do you mix in that 4th IAB, 4th FIAB, and integrate it throughout your lesson. So, you know, like the other group said in the do nows, what we do is we really have students who are not just independently doing it, but then pairing, because there's always a different way to find that answer. And there's always a nice way, and everyone knows this, when the student can explain it, for some reason the student understands it from another student better than if I explained it as a teacher. And so this is kind of a methodology that we've used school-wide, where every single lesson teachers are doing this, what we call TWIPS. That's our acronym for the Think, Write, Pair, Share. And that is inviting for students to not just solve these problems, but also discuss them in the rationale for how they got the answer to it. Next slide. So our successes really come. You know, I showed you that first slide. I hope I showed you that first slide where we were dead last, and you know, now in the area we are you know, 3rd, and what's really neat for us is just the success that has come, and we contribute a lot of this to kind of this model that we just discussed and what we've done, you know. And so for us, it's always nice to see, you know, you have the historically underrepresented population, that second to last column there, and you see the districts and surrounding you and the free and reduced lunch. And you know, when you write in your core values and your mission statement that all students can succeed, you see that, boy, all students really can succeed. And so the model's working. We continue to grow with it. But for us, these are the wins. You know, these are the wins when it's tough in education to get all those wins. So we're really proud of that, and really contribute our work with CSDE of helping us get there. Next slide. So our next steps, you know, one thing that we really want to do is we talked about the 6th grade, having that interdisciplinary kind of tackling the ELA. And it's something that we just, you know, you can't hurt a kid by getting more ELA stuff. And so how do you integrate that into our 7th and 8th grade as well? We believe we're going to see strong success coming up in May. And so how do we implement that, and how do we train our teachers with professional development opportunities to be able to feel comfortable to deliver this in 7th and 8th grade? You know, we also want to continue to share the high quality assessment questions, you know, using that Edulastic and to build the unit assessments, which just requires the confidence and an understanding of what our kids going to see in May, and how can they get familiar with it, and also stronger in how they can understand what is being asked of them and to have the skills necessary to do it. We're going to continually look at and what is the right IABs to use, what's the right FIABs, how does it align with our curriculum, and continue to put that in there. But one thing that we also, you know, have noticed is that pride of students, right? It's the one piece that I wish I could talk more about, but when kids really want to do well, that's when it happens. And so how do you motivate the kids to want to do the best? And kids are result driven. They really are. You know, when everyone here in this room knows that 1 week before the, quarter ends, all of a sudden kids start caring a lot about their final grade, right? That final report card. And for us, it's like, I guarantee in another couple weeks, hey, how can I make sure I pass that SBAC? And so it's that energy and excitement that how do we build that throughout the year so they know their growth. They understand what that number is, they understand what does a 2 really mean. Well, it could be a 3, it could be a 2, but how do they then know where they are and how they continue growing with it? So it's kind of that awareness and ownership, and then also that spirit that comes out of them wanting to be the best version of themselves that they can be. And so we also want to show them more exemplars. Some of the answers that can come. I think some of the pieces that we can show them is how do you answer properly. We've done that now with some of our 6th grade, and how can we build that bank of that. And then that kind of goes to how do we give the honest feedback that provides that explicit detail. And that's that last step that the University of Pittsburgh has for a high leverage practice. How is that honest feedback allowing for students to get better themselves? So that's the summary of everything, Abe. So I think the last slide was any questions, but that concludes our presentation.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Lisa. That was awesome. I was waiting for Smarty the Dragon to come on, but I guess he's waiting
He
for the
was on the
finale.
front page. He was on the,
Yeah.
there he is.
Thanks, Nick.
Can Abe borrow that?
There he is. Thank you, Nick. Thanks, Lisa.
No problem.
Any questions for Nick and Lisa before we turn it over to Holly Miller from Ledyard? You can, I know they're hanging around for the remainder of the webinar, so if you have any questions, you can certainly chat them into the chat. And we appreciate you bringing your story and telling us a little bit about what you guys are doing down there. Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Lisa.
Abe, the documents that Nick referenced, I posted the original, which was the 2017, 2018, and 18-19 study. That was the first view, the first analysis of the relationship between student participation in IABs and growth on the Smarter Balance assessments. And then there was a second version of that was done to see how that lasted over the last few years. So that's on our interim page, which I'll show you in our resources at the end, but both versions of those that show that there is a significant increase in student summative scores based on how many IABs they're exposed to. And again, with it's the first 2, what we're hearing, and I know Holly's going to reiterate this as well, but again, that purposeful use of assessment. So those are posted in the chat, the links for those, if you want those.
Thanks, Christy. So going to our third person in the lineup and our outstanding lineup. Holly, are you out there? Yes, you are. I see you. So I'm going to hand you the baton and just let me know when you want to advance the slides.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, thank
Yes.
you. My name is Holly Miller. I am the District Language Arts, Social Studies, and EL Coordinator for Ledyard Public Schools. I've been in education for 29 years, and I've been in Ledyard for approximately 18 years. Can you please go to the next slide? Next. So basically what I would like to talk about now is I'm going to give you a little bit of historical information on how Ledyard has used IABs in the past. Based off of historical data and information, we also worked on revising our district plans for IAB implementation. I'll talk a little bit about professional development during this school year, and we've identified next steps for instruction. I have a slide that is specific to ML supports. And then again, I'll talk a little bit about next steps in terms of moving forward in the 24-25 school year, and then I'll wrap it up with questions and comments. Next. In terms of a little bit of background, in terms of Ledyard, what we've done in previous years, we've never made it so that teachers had to administer several IABs. We basically were required teachers to administer 1 or 2 IABs in order for them to become familiar with the language, and as well as students to become familiar with the tools and how to use the technology platform before they take these Smarter Balanced assessment. We did not formally assess certain skills within our units of study, so that's how we selected the IABs that we wanted to include in previous years. And then we did provide some PD on the claims, targets, analysis of the IABs, and some next steps. However, based off of our SBAC data over the last several years, our scores have really flatlined. So we knew we needed to take a different approach in terms of moving forward. So this school year, we did do some real work to help improve and increase the number of IABs that we are doing. We also did some work on analyzing the IABs and then identifying some next steps with teachers. Next slide, please. So what we did, and just like the other presenters that talked a little bit about, it's important to make sure that you're reviewing the SBAC scores from the previous years, looking at the data collectively, identifying strengths and challenges within each grade level, see if there's patterns across grade levels and trends within the variety of claims. In grades 3 through 5, we wanted to improve we wanted to improve on number one, the number of IABs that we were administering. So we designed a plan. We took a look at the entire school year. We looked at opportunities where we could infuse more IABs, both in terms of instructionally as well as test-like scenarios. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes, and I have a sample to show you. In grades 6 through 8, we really took a look at our units of study. And we began to infuse our IABs within those units. So we really took a look at the skills and strategies within each unit. And then we went over and looked at the available IABs, and we did a comparison between the two. And since then, we have infused more IABs into our units of study. And we've done some shifting of our units of study as well. We've been very intentional this year in terms of professional learning. And we've done a lot more work than previous years with really unwrapping and how to use smarter tools for teachers. We are finding that that's a really great resource. So next slide, please. I must have done the fade in approach during my slides. That's why it's taking a little bit of a delay. In terms of grades 3 through 5, we included a document to include a variety of resources. We have several veteran teachers in Ledyard, but we also have a lot of brand new teachers that don't have any familiarity with the IABs. So we wanted to make sure that we addressed all teachers and differentiate what we were doing so we could accommodate everybody. So we created a document that teachers could have access to at any time, and they could use it during a PLC opportunity. They could use it during professional development. And I'll show you what that looks like on the next slide. We took a look at the pacing guide for ELA in grades 3 through 5. And like I said before, we really only required 1 IAB. And, you know, based upon our results with both the IAB and SBAC, we felt as though students and teachers both needed to do more IABs to understand the language, to understand you know, the types of item types and how to approach those different item types and so forth. Next slide. Here's an example of the IAB resource document that we have created for teachers. And of course, we didn't just hand this to them. We went over this with them so that they understood what this resource and how it could be utilized. My colleague and I created a Screencastify to really go over how to use the platform. Both for new teachers as well as a reinforcement for our veteran teachers. We've provided links to our ELA construct vocabulary, smarter tools for teachers, videos, playlists. And the last one I want to talk a little bit about creating an answer key document using the interim assessment item portal. That was something that we decided to do that was new this year because we really felt as though prior to giving an IAB, teachers really needed to recognize what was the content of that IAB. And especially if they were using it in an instructional manner, they would need to know, they would need to be privy to that prior to administering it or using it for instructional purposes to help them in their instructional practice. Next slide. Here is a sample of a grade 3 unit, an IAB alignment. You'll see on the left-hand side at the top going across our pacing for our unit of study, the unit name, the IAB alignment that we use specifically to align with our unit of study, when to administer, the purpose. We really feel like the purpose is really important. And then we also provided teachers with the IAB playlist that was connected specifically to that IAB as a next step and a next resource. So you'll see anything, mostly everything in yellow, I think with the exception of maybe one. We wanted to really create a balance of both using IABs for instructional purposes and also using them as a test-like scenario. We felt like there's obviously two purposes for each one, and we wanted to strike a balance between the two. And I do want to mention that when we are using IABs as an instructional practice, we're trying to use it throughout our unit of study, maybe in the morning doing a warm-up. However, if we're using it as a test-like scenario, we have asked teachers to administer it approximately halfway through the unit. And what that will allow is it will allow teachers to sort of analyze the results and then use the remainder of their days to do some reteaching and to infuse some reteaching based off of the data from that particular IAB. So this is a sample of grade 3, and we did this in grade 4 as well as in grade 5. We are going to probably revise this for next school year because you may not see it specifically, but there were some that we did and they were too close back to back. We want to be able to spread them out a little bit more. We don't want to create test exhaustion for students or for teachers. So we do need to do a better job at balancing that out a little bit, and we'll do that work for next school year. Next slide. In terms of grades 6 through 8, that is where we really noticed a significant flat line. So we took a step back and really tried to process like the why behind why our scores were not improving. We did take a deep dive into looking at our units of study, and we did some reorganization with our units of study. And we also wanted to ensure that in our units of study, we were clearly specific in terms of the skills that needed to be taught in every unit and assessed versus those that are covered and maybe just spiraled throughout units of study. We wanted to ensure that we had a variety of complex texts. We wanted to ensure that we had both formal and informal assessments. So, both formative assessments to help us drive instruction, and again, to do a better job of aligning IABs into our revised units of study. Next slide. Here is a sample. I just wanted to mention that this is not our unit of study. This is an organizer that we use to collect information and to collect the missing parts that were not included in our other curriculum unit of study. So here's a grade 8 sample unit revision. You'll see at the top, unit 1, understanding the world through text. You'll see we added in the skills taught and assessed. And then we also added in skills that are covered. So anything that's covered would not necessarily be directly assessed, but it would still be taught and spiral throughout the unit. We've infused learning progressions along the way too, both for teachers as well as for students. So students, and we're using the same learning progressions 6 through 8. So they are very familiar for students when they move up into the grade levels. And then you'll see at the bottom that we try to provide a variety of complex texts within our units of study. Next slide. This is another grade 8 sample for IAB alignment. You'll see at the bottom that we, in this particular unit, we aligned read informational text and women in space explanatory performance task. We recognize that we don't necessarily do enough assessment with writing. We do a lot for reading, but we really value obviously writing as well. So we wanted to make sure that we are specifically identifying where are there opportunities to do some assessments in writing. So we integrated a performance task in here in this particular unit of study. Next slide. And moving on to professional learning and get grades 3 through 5, just like the, I believe it was the first group that presented, we are also looking at DataWise as a resource and trying to make that consistent across the district. Right now, we're using it at particularly one elementary school, but so far it's going pretty well. The steps that we use in it, again, would be to really what part of the data or student work caught your attention. It's a matter of stating and observing, not jumping, moving forward and doing anything else other than just making observations. Step 2 is what questions do you have? What does the data tell us? And what does it not tell us? That's a really important component too. What is it not telling us about individual student data, cohorts of and groups of students? Step 3, what are the problems of practice suggested by the data? And what is one action step that can be taken to improve student outcomes for students? We're realizing that when we identify one problem of practice and we stick with one action steps, it's certainly more manageable. And we feel as though the outcome and impact on student learning is going to be greater rather than having several problems of practice. And then the step 4 is doing a gallery walk with teachers on what trends do you notice across the grade levels. Other professional learning that we've included this year is really looking at our ELA construct vocabulary. We had that embedded in our units of study, but we also provided opportunities to look at the ELA construct vocabulary and really dig into the ones that terms that they do use instructionally versus those that they do not use instructionally, and when are there greater opportunities to use terms interchangeably as well, in addition to written responses to text. And then we've also, as I mentioned earlier, we've done some work with some more work with Smarter Tools for Teachers in really using it as a resource, really digging into the Connections playlist, looking at the instructional resources, looking at the different levels and opportunities for lessons that can happen after the IABs have been implemented. Next slide. Moving on to grades 6 through 8, professional learning. Again, we do have a mix of new teachers and veteran teachers, so we found that it was very important to just do a review of the SBAC claims and targets, as well as the ELA construct vocabulary. Again, teachers are administering these assessments. They need to be aware of the purpose behind each claim and what does that mean in terms of instruction for them. We had an opportunity to look specifically at the training guide for grade 7. We used the brief right, which was claim 2 target 3A. We looked at analyzing and deconstructing the preamble, the stimulus, the item stem, and the scoring rubric. And one of the things that we noticed was that in the item stem, it asked students to, that the teachers noticed that the term controlling idea was used in this question stem, but they've never used it in their instruction. So we went through and recognized that we need to start, again, using those terms interchangeably so that when they get to the SBAC assessment, that they are not surprised by any of the academic vocabulary. And then again, we looked at the anchor sets, and then we did a calibration using the check set. And an example of one of the things that we noticed is that in writing in particular, for this particular brief right, the item included what students had to do was they had to actually give a beginning paragraph to an introduction to the paragraphs and the closing. And we don't often do that all the time. We have kids go through process writing, but we don't necessarily use strategies where we ask them to write a conclusion or add more detail to a middle paragraph. So we recognized that we needed to do that moving forward. And then we gave time in their additional PLCs to look at their own grade level and sort of walk through the same process that we did, just to help them build a better understanding of what students are going to be experiencing with the IABs and the SBAC. Next slide. In terms of our impact on instruction, we've talked about using the IABs more as a part of a class warm-up and increasing our dialogue between students with the accountable talk. We want to be able to include more brief writes and have students do more self-scoring, and then having them circle back to make sure that they're revising their brief writes. We created ELA item specification booklets for teachers so they could see the different ways that questions could be presented, and that does have a direct impact on how they ask them in their classroom. We want to add more brief writes into assessments. We want to, in terms of listening and interpreting, we recognize that we needed to do a little bit more with that. So we talked about using podcasts to improve in that area. Again, using the ELA construct vocabulary interchangeably. And we really want to see evidence of that in the classrooms. We want to see teachers using the language, and we want to see charts up in classrooms where students can access that as a resource for both during their discussions and during their opportunities for writing. And then we also created some SBAC ELA test tips and strategies prior to SBAC just to get students motivated. Next slide. This slide here talks specifically about our ML population, and I don't think there's anything on here that's going to be like a real aha, but I do think it's important for us to recognize that our ML staff needs to be included in all of the PD that we do. They are an integral part of our district, and they are an integral part of providing supports and scaffolds for students who are identified ML. So again, including them in professional development is really important, and integrating them into classroom discussions and PLCs are important. Making sure that our ML teachers are sharing strategies that they're using with classroom teachers and vice versa. We also think it's important for the ML teachers to know ahead of time what types of supports are available for students during the IAB and SBAC, so that when they are using during their regular instruction, they're incorporating that if students need it. And then vice versa, if they are not using it in instruction, they should not have that type of support offered during the actual administration. Again, the vocabulary piece for our ML students are really important. So we do a lot with vocabulary notebooks, mnemonic devices. We want to ensure that our ML teachers are familiar with the ELA construct vocabulary, not just in that student's particular grade level, but the grade levels before, to ensure that students have a solid understanding of what those terms mean. We also talk about why it's really important, and this really goes for all students, having conversations with students about the why of the assessment and what is the purpose of it and why are we doing this, and just being transparent about this. Again, modeling for students the different item types and what strategies you need to approach the different item types that are on the IABs, and also making sure that our ML students are really familiar with the use of technology, so they are familiar with the keyboard and all of the tools that they will encompass when they go to begin using the test platform. Next slide. Moving into the 2024-2025 school year, of course, we're going to continue to review SBAC scores, identify strengths and weaknesses. We want to take a look at the analysis of the threshold achievement level descriptors. That's going to be an important tool for us to take a look at what students can do based off of their levels from Smarter Balanced. We want to create lesson collections for Smarter Tools for teachers, so it's more easily accessible for teachers. We want to continue to calibrate using the training guides. We felt like that was a very important tool, an opportunity to build our understanding of terms, item types, and again, how to infuse those things into instruction. And then again, we will have certain expectations of things like looking at and listening to teachers using those terms interchangeably, and then making sure that they are using the ELA construct vocabulary, not just through their discussions, but in student written responses and so forth. Next slide. And that wraps up my presentation. Are there any questions or comments?
Thank you, Holly. if you have any questions, you can drop them in the chat or raise your hand, or I know we're approaching time, if not over. If we also have some resources to share, but we'll wait a minute here if there are any questions.
While folks are getting ready to, if they're thinking about their questions, I do just want to say that, you know, as somebody who has been working with the interims since they were developed, you know, I'm hearing a theme across all three schools, and the reason for success seems to be this pattern of using them. You know, there's both the teachers and the students getting exposure. That, I think, you know, it's looking for patterns that you can show teachers how to use the interims and the data, looking at students using the interims, the tools, the system. I see intentional and guided PD. I kept hearing that idea of everybody being on the same page, the importance of PLCs, and again, that planning and scheduling the time into curriculum so that teachers aren't just trying to fit them in willy-nilly, but they're really having using them in a purposeful way throughout the curriculum. And I'm seeing the forms all the way across, this idea of collecting the information and then reflecting so that you have a way of looking at the data. I think that that's really important to teachers to help them narrow the focus. I know the larger the school district, the more overwhelming it can be for folks to try and look at this, even if we're trying to help larger school districts analyze their interim data. That can be very overwhelming when you have huge school districts. Across everybody, this idea of using them, like we talked about in the very first formal or sensible assessment, community of practice presentation, the formal and informal use. So the beauty of these, and now the interim assessment item portal, it's not like the old days, like Michelle was, that Melissa was saying, hey, I had to sit there and screenshot these. You don't have to do that anymore. I see her laughing in the corner there. Those days are over. You know, we have the interim assessment item portal. I'm going to give you the link to that in Tools for Teachers. And we did do our second presentation was about that. And there's a demonstration that's posted also. But the idea that you can go in there and use something informally, again, we don't want it to leave the school district and go home with kids, but the idea that you can do it as a do now or modeling, we've been, you know, encouraging this for years. So it seems like these are all themes that are running through everybody. And I do want to note, as we go through our resources, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to move, Abe, if you could pop to the next slide. We have different resources, the Connecticut portal, that's the second resource there. That Connecticut portal where you go for assessment has everything you need to know. The interim using assessment, interim assessment item portal video. The link that I put in the chat is to the interim resources page where the content relevant vocabulary that everybody brought up for math and ELA are listed there. Holly, I think you were talking about appropriate complex text for ELA. That is there are all of the text placemats so that you can work through those with teachers, and lists of tests are also on that site. And then Nick, I think that you brought up the writing, and everybody was really looking at the brief rights and the writing. I have rubrics listed there also so that you can go ahead and access the writing rubrics. So there are a number of resources on that page for you. And then Abe, can you just go to the next one? So then we have accessibility resources for obviously the accessibility chart and our guidelines, but a reader options table, and then embedded and non-embedded designated supports for English learners and multilingual learners, which again is helpful for kids using those if they use them in the interims, which everybody was already saying they're exposed to that. Then when it comes time for the summative assessments, it's just they're in their comfort zone. It's not something that they have to learn that's new. And then Abe, next one is the tools for teachers resources, excuse me. So you have the Content Explorer, which will give you items, but also documents. Most of the important ones we've already put on our interim resources page. And then the tools for teachers, and you have the sample item website. The tools for teachers has the interim item assessment portal in there. And then I think that's it for us, right? And then any of our contact information. But if there's something that we've talked about that you want access to and you can't find, send us an email, send me an email. I'll send you back whatever we can. If it's more focused towards special populations, then you might want to email Deirdre and or Katie, who are our experts for that. SAT is Michelle, and Kim does everything. So if you have a question and it goes to any of us and it's not, we're not the one who can answer it, we'll get you the answer also. And then I think we have time for questions, but Abe, did you wanna, I don't see any other questions. Did anybody wanna come off the mute and ask anything or add anything? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't see anything, but well said on the wrap up. Thanks for kind of connecting some of the central points. I think you're absolutely right. And then I just want to say thanks again to our districts, Holly, Nick, Lisa, Ann, and Melissa. Thank you very much for showing up. And then thank you to all for attending today. So good luck with summative assessment. I know that it's our most favorite time of year. We're talking about interims now, but I know this is not the biggest game in town. So, and good luck the remainder of the assessment window. If you need us for anything in the assessment office, as Christy said, just reach out to us. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thanks to our presenters. Great job.
Fabulous.